Hey guys, tonight we begin the story about the queen who slept with her stepsons, the scandal of Fredegund of Neustria, before you comfortable like. And subscribe the video. And if you really enjoy, then let me in the comment section. The story of Fredegund is not simply about one woman's rise to power. In the brutal world of the early Middle Ages, it is about lust, betrayal, propaganda, and survival in a kingdom where life expectancy was short. Kings were murdered by their own kin, and queens were as dangerous as armies. In the 6th century, the Frankish world was divided into rival kingdoms, Neustria, Austrasia, and Burgundy, ruled by the descendants of the Merovingian dynasty. These rulers were descended from Clovis I, the first king to unite much of Gaul under Frankish rule. Yet within a few generations, the dynasty had degenerated into infighting, assassinations, and endless civil wars. It was in this world that Fredegund rose from a low-born servant to become one of the most infamous queens in European history. She was accused of plotting assassinations, orchestrating murders, and even of sleeping with her own stepsons to secure influence over the royal succession. But how much of this was true, and how much was medieval character assassination aimed at discrediting powerful women? To answer these questions, we must go back to the world of the Merovingians, the blood-soaked dynasty that gave rise to Fredegund's legend. To understand Fredegund, we must first understand the Merovingian dynasty, which ruled the Frankish kingdoms from the late 5th century until the mid-8th century. The dynasty began with Clovis I, r. 481–511, who converted to Christianity and established the foundations of Frankish rule in Gaul, modern France. But after Clovis's death, his kingdom was divided among his sons, setting a precedent of partitioned rule that led to constant rivalry. By the 6th century, the Frankish kingdom was divided into 3 major realms: Austrasia, centered in modern-day northeastern France, Belgium, and western Germany; Neustria, covering northern France and centered around Paris and Soissons; Burgundy, centered in the Rhone Valley in southeastern France. The kings were often young, inexperienced, or manipulated by ambitious nobles and bishops. But the queens, royal wives and widows, played an outsized role in politics. Because kings often had multiple wives or concubines, and because succession was not strictly based on primogeniture, disputes between legitimate and illegitimate children were common. This created a deadly environment where marriage alliances, adultery, and rumors of incest could determine the fate of kingdoms. The Merovingians were also infamous for their brutality. Gregory of Tours, a 6th century bishop and historian, described a world where royal assassinations were common. Brothers murdered brothers, queens ordered the deaths of rivals, and treachery was a fact of life. It was into this blood-soaked dynasty history remembers queens for their crowns, palaces, and dynasties. But Fredegund's story begins not in luxury, but in servitude. Unlike Brunhild, her famous rival, who was a Visigothic princess, Fredegund was of humble, possibly enslaved origins. Medieval chroniclers like Gregory of Tours never gave us a detailed account of her background, perhaps because her low birth made her rise all the more scandalous. She may have been a servant or slave in the royal household of Chilperic I, king of Neustria. Others suggest she was a lady-in-waiting, serving Queen Audovra, Chilperic's first wife. Regardless of the details, one fact is clear: Fredegund entered history not as royalty, but as a woman of the shadows, a presence in the background of the Neustrian court, unnoticed except for her beauty, intelligence, and ambition. The world of Chilperic I was often described as the Nero and Herod of our time by Gregory of Tours. He was a man of violent passions, quick to anger, addicted to women, and untrustworthy even to his closest allies. He already had a wife, Audovra, who bore him several children, but, in true Merovingian fashion, marriage was not a barrier to lust. Chilperic maintained mistresses and concubines, and Fredegund soon became one of them. What set her apart was not simply beauty, but her political cunning. She knew how to make herself indispensable, not just as a lover, but as an advisor. Where other mistresses might fade into obscurity, Fredegund rose higher with each passing year. The fall of Ardovra, one of the first turning points in Fredegund's story, is the downfall of Queen Ardovra. The legend goes that Ardovra made a fatal mistake involving church rules on baptism. In Merovingian custom, a queen who assisted in the baptism of her own child was barred by canon law from being present at the subsequent confirmation. Ardovra, perhaps unaware of this or tricked, participated in her daughter's baptism in a way that violated this rule. Fredegund allegedly seized upon this mistake and reported it to Chilperic, framing Ardovra as having offended God and dishonored the throne. The king, already infatuated with Fredegund, used this as justification to repudiate his wife. Ardovra was dismissed, and Fredegund took her place as queen consort. It was a shocking transformation, a servant turned mistress turned queen. But this was only the beginning of Fredegund's ruthless rise. Galswintha's murder Chilperic, however, was not a man of consistency. Before marrying Fredegund formally, he sought an alliance with the Visigothic kingdom of Spain. To cement this, he married Galswintha, a Spanish princess and the sister of Brunhild. For a time, Fredegund was cast aside, but her influence at court did not wane. She plotted, waited, and eventually struck. Within a short time of Galswintha's marriage to Chilperic, the young queen was found strangled in her bed. Many chroniclers, including Gregory of Tours, openly accused Fredegund of orchestrating the murder. Chilperic quickly took Fredegund back, making her queen once again. The scandal was explosive. Not only had a foreign princess been murdered, but the act ignited a blood feud between Fredegund and Brunhild that would dominate Frankish politics for decades. From mistress to queen, Fredegund was now firmly established as Queen of Neustria. Her path to power had been paved with betrayal, manipulation, and bloodshed, but her enemies multiplied. The children of Ardovra despised her, and her stepsons viewed her as an interloper. Meanwhile, Brunhild of Austrasia, her murdered rival's sister, was determined to avenge Galswintha's death. In this dangerous world, Fredegund would need every ounce of cunning and ruthlessness to survive, and she did survive, longer than most. But survival came at a cost, and with it came the scandals that made her name infamous. Had Fredegund emerged, a woman of humble origins who would rise higher and fall harder than most. When Fredegund was restored to Chilperic's side after the murder of Galswintha, she faced the reality of her new position. She had ascended to the throne of Neustria, but her crown was not secure. The Neustrian court was a nest of vipers. Nobles resented her low birth. Bishops whispered against her influence. Even within her own household, she was surrounded by enemies. Above all, the greatest threats came not from outside, but from within her own family, the king's sons by his first wife, Ardovra. A queen surrounded by rivals, Ardovra had given Chilperic several sons, Merovingian, Clovis, and Basina. These royal children represent a direct challenge to Fredegund's authority. If any of them gained the throne, her own children would be cast aside. Fredegund's situation was precarious. She was queen, yes, but her hold on power depended entirely on Chilperic's favor and her ability to control the succession. In the volatile world of the Merovingians, that meant one thing: eliminating rivals before they eliminated you. The first blood soon after Ardovra was dismissed. She herself fell victim to Fredegund's plots. Some versions describe Ardovra being lured into a trap and strangled. Others claim she was stabbed. Her daughter Clotilde did not fare better. Gregory of Tours alleges that Fredegund ordered the child to be thrown into boiling water, a story that horrified later generations and cemented Fredegund's reputation as a cruel stepmother. Whether these tales are fact or exaggeration, they reflect how contemporaries viewed Fredegund, not just as a schemer, but as a woman willing to kill even children to protect her position. Whispers of forbidden desire, but murder was not the only weapon in Fredegund's arsenal. Chroniclers accused her of using seduction as a tool of control. Gregory of Tours and later medieval writers spread rumors that Fredegund seduced her own stepsons, drawing them into sexual liaisons in order to dominate them, or perhaps to compromise and discredit them. Or one such figure was Merovingian, Chilperic's eldest son by Odovra. Merovich had ambitions of his own and resented his stepmother's influence, yet according to scandalous reports, Fredegund managed to ensnare him in a relationship of lust and manipulation. The details are murky. Some say Merovich willingly entered into her bed, enchanted by her beauty. Others insist she forced herself upon him, using her power to entrap him. Either way, the story circulated that Fredegund had broken the ultimate taboo, incest with her husband's son. Scandal is a political weapon. Why would such rumors arise? Part of the answer lies in the brutal political climate of the time. In the 6th century, accusations of sexual sin, especially incest, were one of the most powerful tools of political propaganda. Where a woman could be destroyed not only by armies but by whispers. To accuse Fredegund of sleeping with her stepsons was to portray her as unnatural, corrupt, and unfit to be queen. It painted her as a figure who defied both morality and religion. It also served to weaken the legitimacy of her children. If their mother was known as a seductress and adulteress, then their claims to the throne could be dismissed as the product of corruption. Chilperic's blind eye. What did Chilperic think of these rumors? The sources are divided. Some suggest he was aware but unwilling to act, perhaps even indifferent, as long as Fredegund secured his power. Others imply that he loved her too deeply to believe the accusations. What is certain is that Fredegund remained queen. Despite the gossip, despite the hostility of nobles and clergy, she held on to her place beside Chilperic. Power in the bedroom, power in the court. Fredegund's reputation as both seductress and assassin grew during these years. Chroniclers claimed she used poisons, daggers, and charms to eliminate rivals. But just as powerful was her ability to manipulate through intimacy. She controlled Chilperic with her allure, silenced enemies with her ruthlessness, and allegedly bent even his sons to her will. Her story became a parable in medieval writings. The dangerous woman who mixed sex and politics, wielding both to deadly effect. The making of a scandalous legacy. By the time the rumors of her liaisons with her stepson spread, Fredegund had already secured her position as queen. But the cost was enormous. She became the most vilified woman in Frankish history. True or not, these accusations ensured that for centuries to come, Fredegund would be remembered less as a ruler and more as a symbol of scandal, lust, and blood. Lust and blood. By the time Fredegund secured her place as Queen of Neustria, her reputation was already dark. She had allegedly orchestrated the downfall of Queen Odovra, been implicated in the murder of Galswintha, and whispered about in scandalous liaisons with her stepsons. But the full scale of her ruthlessness was only beginning to emerge. If Fredegund was to survive, she had to ensure that every rival inside and outside her kingdom was silenced, and silence in her world was rarely achieved without bloodshed. The death of Bishop Fredegund, one of the earliest and most notorious examples of Fredegund's brutality, came in her conflict with the church. Fredegund, Bishop of Rouen, was a powerful cleric who dared to oppose her. He had officiated the marriage of Merovingian, Chilperic's rebellious son, to Brunhild of Austrasia, Fredegund's sworn enemy. By doing so, He not only defied Chilperic's authority, but also gave legitimacy to Fredegund's greatest rival. This act could not go unpunished. According to Gregory of Tours, Fredegund ordered assassins to strike the bishop. During an Easter service in Rouen, Pretextatus was attacked and fatally wounded. As he lay dying, he publicly accused Fredegund of the plot. The murder shocked the kingdom. To kill a bishop in such a brazen fashion was to challenge the very authority of the church. Yet Chilperic did nothing. Whether blinded by love or complicit in the crime, the king shielded Fredegund from punishment. The message was clear. No one, not even God's servants, was safe from the queen's reach. The elimination of rival Queen Fredegund's fury was not reserved for bishops. Other queens and royal women also fell victim to her plots. One of her most infamous targets was Basina, a daughter of Audovra and one of Fredegund's stepdaughters. Basina had been sent to a convent, a common fate for royal women who were politically inconvenient. But even within the walls of the church, she was not beyond Fredegund's reach. Basina, perhaps restless with cloistered life, escaped her convent and raised a rebellion against her stepmother. Fredegund responded swiftly and brutally, quashing the revolt and ensuring Basina's punishment. Accounts differ, but many suggest that Basina was forced back into religious life in disgrace, a symbolic way for Fredegund to demonstrate that rebellion against her would always end in humiliation or death. The weapon of fear, what made Fredegund so dangerous, was not just the murders themselves, but the atmosphere of terror she cultivated. In the Neustrian court, everyone knew that Fredegund's hand could strike at any time. Nobles who defied her could be poisoned. Priests who opposed her could be stabbed at the altar. Rivals who plotted against her might wake to find assassins at their door. Fear became her most powerful weapon. By making examples of her enemies, Fredegund ensured that few dared to cross her openly. The rivalry with Brunhild. But there was one enemy Fredegund could not intimidate: Brunhild of Austrasia. Brunhild was everything Fredegund was not: a princess by birth, educated, sophisticated, and supported by the prestige of her Visigothic lineage. Where Fredegund rose from obscurity, Brunhild carried the blood of kings. The two women embodied different paths to power, but both were ruthless, ambitious, and unwilling to yield. Their rivalry began with the murder of Brunhild's sister, Galswintha, whom Fredegund had supplanted. From that moment, Brunhild swore vengeance. For decades, the two queens fought a proxy war through their husbands, children, and grandchildren. The feud was not just personal. It shaped the political destiny of the Frankish kingdoms. Every battle between Neustria and Austrasia carried the shadow of their enmity. The assassination of Chilperic, perhaps the most dramatic event in Fredegund's bloody career, was the sudden death of her own husband, King Chilperic I, in 584. Chilperic was murdered while returning from a hunting expedition near Chelles. He was stabbed by an unknown assassin, and his killers were never identified. Many suspected Fredegund herself. After all, his death left her as regent for their young son, Clothartu. By removing Chilperic, she rid herself of an unpredictable husband and gained control of the kingdom. Gregory of Tours, though careful not to directly accuse her, noted the suspicious circumstances and the fact that Fredegund moved quickly to secure power after his death. Whether or not she ordered the killing, the murder of Chilperic fit perfectly into her established pattern. When someone stood in her way, they died. The queen regent with Chilperic gone, Fredegund faced the most dangerous challenge yet, ruling as regent for her son in a court filled with enemies. But far from being weakened, she proved more formidable than ever. She wielded power with the authority of both queen and mother, crushing opposition and continuing her blood feud with Brunhild. Her legacy as the Queen of Blood was now cemented. She had killed queens, bishops, and perhaps even a king. She was feared, hated, and whispered about in every corner of the Frankish world. And yet she endured. Fredegund's story is not only about murder and power, but also about scandal and sexuality. In the chronicles of the Merovingians, she is remembered not just as a queen of blood, but as a woman who allegedly broke the ultimate taboo, seducing her own stepsons. These accusations, whispered in courts, written by bishops, and immortalized in chronicles, were some of the most damaging to her reputation. Whether true or not, they painted Fredegund as a figure of unrestrained lust and corruption. But where did these stories come from? And why did they matter so much? The alleged affair with Merovach among all the rumors, the most infamous concerned Merovich, Chilperic's eldest son by Audovra. Merovich had long resented Fredegund. She was the woman who displaced his mother, manipulated his father, and threatened his claim to the throne. When he married Brunhild of Austrasia, Fredegund's sworn enemy, it seemed certain he had chosen open war against her. But yet, astonishingly, medieval sources claim that Merovich also became Fredegund's lover. Gregory of Tours, the great chronicler of this age, never gave us graphic detail, but his careful insinuations were enough to spark centuries of gossip. The rumor was that Fredegund used her beauty and cunning to ensnare Merovich, luring him into a relationship that was both incestuous and politically ruinous. Whether Merovich was seduced willingly or against his will is unclear. Some versions of the story portray him as captivated by her charms. Others describe Fredegund as manipulating him, using sex as a weapon to keep him off balance. What is certain is that the alleged affair made Merovich look weak, compromised, and dishonorable, while Fredegund appeared both dangerous and depraved. The stepmothers cursed the idea of a queen sleeping with her stepsons was more than simple gossip. It touched upon one of the deepest taboos of medieval society. In Christian moral teaching, incest was considered a grievous sin. And the incest taboo extended not only to blood relatives, but also to a final kinship, relationships created by marriage. This meant that Fredegund and Merovach, though not blood-related, were still considered mother and son in the eyes of the church. Their alleged affair was, therefore, both incestuous and adulterous. To accuse Fredegund of this sin was to paint her as a queen who had defiled the sacred bonds of family and religion. It was not merely scandal, it was blasphemy. Rumors as political weapons, but were the stories true? Or were they weapons of propaganda used against her? The answer lies in the broader context of Merovingian politics. In this brutal world, assassination was one way to destroy an enemy, but so was character assassination. Brunhild, Fredegund's greatest rival, had every reason to spread stories of her immorality. So did the bishops, who despised her influence over Chilperic and feared her defiance of the church. By labeling her a seductress and incestuous queen, they weakened her standing among nobles and ensured her infamy would last long after her death. Such accusations were not unique to Fredegund. Powerful women throughout history, from Cleopatra to Empress Theodora, were often smeared with charges of sexual corruption. In a patriarchal world, to accuse a woman of unrestrained lust was to undermine her authority and legitimacy. Other stepson accusations, while Merovich is the stepson most often linked to Fredegund, rumors also swirled around her relations with other children of Audovra. Some chroniclers suggested she may have attempted to seduce or manipulate Clovis, another of Chilperic's sons. Chilperic's son. Whether these claims were true or not, they all serve the same purpose: to present Fredegund as a woman who destroyed families from within, a poisonous influence at the heart of the Merovingian dynasty. Seduction and power. What makes these rumors so powerful is that they play into a recurring medieval theme. Fredegund's story is told as though her sexuality was her main weapon. She seduced kings, destroyed queens, and corrupted sons. She wielded her body as both lure and dagger, undermining the masculine order of the Frankish kingdoms. Whether she truly seduced her stepsons may never be known. But what matters is that her enemies believed it, or at least spread it, and those stories shaped her legacy more than any battle or treaty. The legacy of lust. By the time these rumors took root, Fredegund had already been accused of murder, poisoning, and betrayal. But it was the stories of incest that ensured her place in history as not just a ruthless queen, but a scandalous one. To medieval chroniclers, she was the embodiment of the evil stepmother, a stock figure in folklore who destroyed children, corrupted heirs, and spread ruin wherever she went. And yet, for all the horror these tales inspired, they also testified to her extraordinary influence. Few queens in history were powerful enough to become the subject of such enduring scandal. Fredegund may have been vilified, but in being vilified, she was remembered.